The next conversation explores how drones and advanced air mobility are revolutionizing emergency response and national resilience, from natural disaster relief to homeland security operations. To guide this session, I'd like to introduce our moderator, Kenji Sugahara, who is the director of the Oregon Department of Aviation.
Thanks.
And a nationally recognized expert on uncrewed systems, otherwise known as the MacGyver of the drone industry. He's an attorney, an experienced UAS operator. Kenji has served on numerous FAA advisory and rulemaking committees, including the Advanced Aviation Advisory Committee and the Remote ID and BVLOS, which means Beyond Visual Line of Sight. Chris Bly, come back in here. He plays a key role in shaping. Kenji plays a key role, not Chris, but Chris plays a different key role. Kenji plays a key role in shaping the future of advanced aviation through leadership in the Advanced Air Mobility Multi-State Collaborative, and as chair of the National Association of State Aviation Officials, Emerging Aeronautics Committee. Kenji and panelists.
Thank you. I thought this panel was going to be about how unicorns and kittens can make aviation better. So I must be in the long room.
Different panel, but you go ahead. You're the moderator.
Yeah, I'm also known as the guy who wears a pink shark. So if you haven't seen me wandering either the halls of a recent conference, that's my usual stick. My next thing that I'm going to be doing is I plan on wearing the pink shark in the halls of Congress. So I guarantee that'll happen. But we have an absolutely wonderful panel stacked up here today. They're all doctors. So I'm going to drop the whole doctor thing if that's okay with everybody. But I'll go ahead and start with introductions. We'll go down the line. So Matt Friedman. Matt Friedman is the chief of the Office of Aviation Planning in the Caltrans Division of Aeronautics. As office chief, Matt oversees statewide airport area land use planning that includes providing guidance to airport land use commissions and local agencies. He oversees review and response to local notifications of intent to overrule ALUC determinations. His current projects include revising the California Airport Land Use Planning Handbook, which has got to be a heavy lift. Oh my goodness, it's land use. And the California Aviation System Plan. So if you don't know what that's all about, it's a big project, and there's a lot of moving parts to it. And he participates in activities related to advanced air mobility, research projects pertaining to assessing locations of potential vertiport sites as well. And he's also a member of the Multi-State Collaborative, which was briefly mentioned. For those who don't know, that's a collection of 35 states in the Choctaw Nation that's helping create commonalities between state policies or best practices and key considerations in the launch of advanced air mobility. So, Matt, say hi.
Good morning, everybody. Wonderful to be here.
And I'll ask you questions right after this, so don't worry. And then Dr. Martha Danley. Martha is an experienced entrepreneur dedicated to developing products that achieve product market fit and drive rapid customer traction in emerging technology markets. As head of marketing at Pivotal, she collaborates with CEO Ken Karkland and a dynamic team to support early access program customers, scale training, and launch new products like the Helix, which is beautiful, by the way. Martha's passion for innovation is evident in her active participation in events such as AirVenture 2023 at Oshkosh, where she showcased Pivotal's eVTOL aircraft Blackfly. Hopefully, I'll be out there this summer. But yeah, say hi.
Hi, everyone. Good morning.
And then next to Martha is Dr. Rodrigo Nieto. Oh, wait, no, Edgar. Ed. Next to Martha is Ed Wagoner. Dr. Wagoner is the founder and CEO of the Franklin Pitt Group, LLC, and is a senior principal at Crown Consulting. He recently retired as a deputy associate administrator for programs in NASA's Aeronautics Research Mission Directorate ARMD, where he was responsible for translating ARMD's research portfolio requirements into specific actionable programs and projects. His broad portfolio responsibilities included particular emphasis on development and validation of technologies focused on advanced air mobility and sustainable aviation. All right. And then next to Ed is Dr. Rodrigo Nieto. Dr. Nieto is a geostrategist. We'll have to hear more about that. And defense futurist focused on the consequences of the accelerating pace of change in homeland security and policing environments. He is a research professor at the National Security Affairs Department and at the Center for Homeland Defense and Security at the Naval Postgraduate School, which is right next door, so it's not too far away, right? And he is also a certified facilitator in the California Commission on Peace Officer Standards and Training and an instructor at the Executive Academy of the Emergency Management Institute. He is also a faculty member of Singularity University. And then finally, but not least, is Dr. Peter Webley. Peter is a research professor of remote sensing as well as the associate director of research at the Alaska Center for Unmanned Aircraft Systems Integration, AQUASI, Geophysical Institute, UAF. Peter's the interim director at UAF Center of Innovation, Commercialization, and Entrepreneurship, Center ICE, and co-leads its federal grants as principal investigator. Peter also leads several projects at AQUASI on the integration of UAS for disaster preparedness and response and integrating new technologies to support operational implementation of UAS into Alaska and the U.S. Arctic. Phew, that's a decent amount. So to start out, we were going to talk about wildfires and disaster response, but I thought, what would be better unless we had a little bit of fun? So I asked each of them, first, what's your favorite color? And what are two fun facts about you? So we'll start with Matt.
Well, thanks, Kenji. My favorite color is Carolina blue. Tar Heels had a rough year this year, but they'll be back. Fun facts are my first professional job out of grad school is right here in Monterey County. And I work for Monterey County Transportation Study, now known as the Transportation Agency of Monterey County. And while I lived in Salinas because I couldn't afford Monterey, I was a part of the Salinas Valley Highlanders Pipe Band. And I was a piper, and I learned how to play bagpipes at McAllister College, which is, I will save that part for you.
I went to Mac, and we lived in dorms that were right next to each other, and it's a very tiny college, so it's a great coincidence. Are you all set?
Sure.
Okay. My favorite color is blue, but with a little slice of hot pink in the middle of it. Got to have some pink, all right? Fun facts. When I was 10 years old, we lived in London, outside of the city, and on a hilltop, and I was riding my bicycle on the driveway with my brother in a wagon tied to the back, and up comes a Rolls Royce. Who gets out of the car? John Lennon.
Wow.
I'm 10 years old. It's 1964. It's like, oh my gosh. But you don't realize how weird this is. And you go into the house and you say, hey, Mom, John Lennon's at the front door. Martha, you are so creative. She's peeling a carrot. She goes to the front door with a carrot peeler. It's John Lennon. He ended up buying the house. So that was a kind of a fun thing that happened in our household. And the other one is I am a grand prize winner for my lime vanilla marmalade in the Marin County State Fair, or County Fair. And if you do a favor for me, you're getting a jar of marmalade, all right? Thank you.
Yeah, I'm Ed Wagner, and first I just want to thank Saracina, Josh, the whole committee that put this together. I mean, yesterday morning after the keynote, and the first panel, I thought this is worth the price of admission in 2 days of work. Just absolutely terrific. I'm pinch hitting for WeTran. We send our regards, in addition to everything going on in the federal government right now and not being able to get permission to come. We is finishing up a campaign in Salinas. It was highlighted last night on the local CBS affiliate in San Francisco, KPIX. So Google that, look at it. It's really some good information on the evaluation of the technologies that we're going to be talking about today. So favorite color, blue, as many of you others had. And I'm going to change my fun fact. So John Lennon, my niece was working at a restaurant in Orlando, and Paul McCartney's stepson was graduating from college there, Rollins College. My sister drove from Birmingham, Alabama to Orlando to sit across the street so that she could see Paul McCartney in person.
Nice. All right.
Okay, so yeah, Rodrigo Nieto, and I'll change it a little bit. It's gonna say black, right? So my daughter would accuse me of being terribly boring by saying that as an answer. As fun facts, just because we're here, I am a private pilot, and one of the weirdest experiences in my life I had was overflying the Marina airport and suddenly seeing this spider flying under me. It was Joby, right? So it was one of the weirdest things, one of the first times that this thing, and it actually has opened my mind of what is gonna be this cognitive integration into the airspace for some of these VTOL technologies as old, rusty, crunchy, historical private pilots start experiencing them, right? It was a very interesting moment to see them flying down there. The second, I would say, I'm a gamer. I spend a lot of time in Flight Simulator. The last few nights I've been spending way more time than I should playing Cyberpunk 2077, in which you had, it's a very interesting example of failed innovation done right later. So they had a horrible deployment. The system, the game was very ambitious. It kept crashing. Everybody thought that the studio was dead. They did a great job patching it, and today is one of the most successful games ever. There's this whole huge component in the game of both the good, the bad, of the ugly, of how vertical takeoff and landing would change urban environments, right? So the whole game, if you see it through that lens, and I care about this topic, so I do, showcases a lot. And if you think from the Jetsons to Blade Runner, right, the role of fiction in shaping our imagination in this case. And I was preparing for this yesterday, and I was playing, and I say, man, I just cannot escape the topic, right? So those would be it.
Perfect.
So I guess I'd start with the fun facts on myself. As you can guess from my accent, I'm from across the water. So I actually came to Alaska to study volcanoes. That's what got me into operational response. Remember one day turning up at work at 11:20 p.m., still in my soccer kit, or football for me, having just played intramural football, and then did a 12-hour shift to monitor the volcano, never went home, sitting there in my football kit. So I'm a big sports fan, pretty much anything. I grew up in my high school in the UK during the Jordan era. My two high school sports coaches were both national level basketball coaches. They coached the England team, Commonwealth England team in the early 80s, and then they ended up in a high school of 900 kids. So sports are pretty much my pastime outside some of my work activities. So my favorite color is red, mainly because of Liverpool Football Club. So I have a combined story relating to the Lennon and McCartney. Is my mum got to see the Beatles play.
Wow.
In a room with about 300 screaming girls in Wigan in 1963, before they came and did the Ed Sullivan Show. So, and then my whole family's from Liverpool. I've been to Abbey Road, I've been in London, I've seen Penny Lane, I've seen Strawberry Fields. Penny Lane signs, that's the other fun fact, Penny Lane signs are now painted onto the wall.
Yep.
Because people were stealing them. Yeah. So they painted the lines on. And I've been to a big fish and chip shop in Penny Lane. But that's my fun fact, is I'm connected to two of the stories through my family. I grew up in the southwest of the UK. And if you're not sure what that looks like, it's Agatha Christie land. Her retirement home was about 10-minute walk from where I grew up.
Perfect. You know, which goes to show you, even though we're a bunch of nerds right here, we're actually kind of cool. So definitely come up and talk to these folks after the panel. But
Kenji, are you saying that bagpipes are for nerds?
yeah, of course. What are you talking about? So we also want to kick this off by showing a little bit a video that Martha shared with us about Pivotal. So let's see if we can get this going.
Okay.
911, what's your emergency?
So that's pretty cool.
I just want to make the point that the subhead for this conference is Shaping the Future of AAM and UAS. But this is here right now. And I just want to say, to shape the future, you have to have something up in the air. You have to have customers. You need to get customer feedback. And this is not CGI. This is a video that we made a couple months ago. And notice, no vertiport. We're talking about a cul-de-sac. There's so much potential, especially being in the market today, to actually try out all of our dreams and hypotheses. And so it's fun to be with a startup. But all of those who also have been in startups, you also know how risky and how scary it can be at the very same time. But I wouldn't have it any other way. So thanks for your feedback.
Perfect. Thank you. So this panel happens in context with what's going on around the U.S., right? You think about what's happening right now. North Carolina, there's fires that have been happening. You look at the L.A. fires, absolute disasters. You even look at North Carolina, that was hit even before with Hurricane Helene. So there's a lot happening in the world today where UAS, drones, and advanced air mobility are going to play such a critical role. And especially in Oregon, where we face the potential Cascadia subduction zone event, which is predicted to be a 9.0 plus earthquake. So that's going to be absolutely critical. So my first question, in context with all these disasters and potential disasters, is I'm going to have you kick it off, Ed. What aviation-related technology or technologies will have the greatest impact on the efficacy of disaster response and wildfire fighting?
So when NASA started this, it wasn't wildfires. So ACERO stands for Advanced Capabilities for Emergency Response. We looked at all the different technologies needed for wildfires, for all kinds of surveillance, as well as health services, to see what are the things that NASA has the right skills to make an impact. And we did a joint little conference workshop with the Forestry Service. What came out of that was, for wildfires, persistent surveillance. That was a key. Persistent, accurate comm. That was a key. Being able to operate with degraded visibility, particularly at night. So that was something we thought, okay, we can have an impact there. And then being able to interoperate with different types of aircraft, whether they were manned or unmanned. So those two kind of key things that came out of that workshop were things that we thought, okay, we can put a project together, work on those technologies, as well as a concept of operations for how everybody should be working together and have an impact. That was the genesis of ACERO. And from that time, not only has NASA developed the technologies, but what we're doing and finishing up today, 2-week campaign, NASA is evaluating those under operational conditions. So that's pretty darn cool stuff. And this is a project that is being funded somewhere between $25 and $30 million a year. That's a lot, but there's a lot going on relative to this. And one of the things that I'm keenly interested in right now, and NASA is interested, is what comes next. Mm-hmm. Where's the most bang for the buck? And hopefully we'll address some of that as we talk through the panel today.
Yeah, I mean, we had a wonderful conversation earlier, and one of the things that we talked about is when we talk to U.S. Forest Service, we talk to BLM, we talk to DOI. There's like, oh, traditional aviation can just take care of it, right? And it's like, no, that's not right. And Rodrigo, you had some good comments on that. Like, what are some of your thoughts?
Yeah, so it's really interesting because the issue with emerging technologies is, by definition, the case usage, the value propositions are unclear compared, but we have a tendency to always try to compare to the current value proposition that we have. So I frequently give the example when we're teaching innovation for DoD, and so how do we used to call automobiles? Well, we used to call them the horseless carriage, right? So, and then how did we call the first driverless cars, right? We love to define things for what they are not, right? And that already shows you that there's a cognitive void in our mind. This is something different. So I would say that a lot of the problems that we're saying is that we have a very strong cognitive bias operationally, and it's understandable, specifically in areas that are high risk, like a wildfire, where we try to take the new technology and just match it to what we were using before. And of course, already we have rotary and fixed wing aircraft doing fire suppression. No. Right? This is different, right? There are so many things, and I'm sure we will be talking about it. There are so many things that changed once you remove the shaved monkey from the middle of the cockpit, right? So that you moved to an area in which you don't need to have the same tolerances for risk, that you can operate with lower levels of visibility, that you can swarm the crap out of the area, right? So there's so many things that they don't fit the paradigm that we have right now. And for that, people like you guys have to be inventing the technology, and then clever operators have to be building the doctrine, right? The concept of operations, right? When we grab it here and then we start to do it. And the first step is, as you were mentioning, Martha, is to put the technology on the hand of the people who are not committed to the prior paradigm and are willing to ask the question, okay, what if? What if we could do things differently? And I think we're in this moment in which a lot of this technology that has been promised to us since the Jetsons is just coming into fruition in things that we can touch. And now it's going to be the challenge of a lot of you guys to take it and do something that has never been done before with it.
Right. It's one huge advantage of running trials. We may have dreams about what we want to do in terms of fire suppression or prevention, but can we do something simple and small to demonstrate the value proposition? And I completely agree with your concept about the paradigm shift. In fact, when we do training with our customer pilots, the folks who come to us who are advanced jet pilots actually have the hardest time on the first couple of days. They have to do unlearning. They're looking for all kinds of gear to touch, and it's just a joystick. It's a very, very simple user interface. And I heard the phrase from Steve yesterday, fly by intent. I thought that's a great phrase. Because it's not even fly-by-wire. There's no wire here, and all the brains are behind them, and they just need to say, I want to go left, I want to go right. And so people who are total neophytes actually adopt this technology faster than people who are more gurus. But I don't want to say there's a big barrier there, because by day 2.5, they're now used to it, and everybody's sort of caught up with each other. But there is a big learning curve, and I think we think about the technology being the driver here, but I think adoption is the thing we need to focus on so much, because there's a lot of either explicit or implicit resistance to change.
You know, it's also moving forward with processes that we already have in place. So for example, Caltrans, we started using drones 9 years ago with this couple of pilots, couple of items. Now we have 350 internally certified pilots, including the trainees, and about 250 drones. And it's really the response is so much more rapid, is that we can go into a place where there's a slide or a fire or an earthquake, assess accurately what's taking place. And just using the example of, let's say, a slip out, like we had down in Big Sur several times recently, but we're able to deploy the drones in a way that's safe, not having to endanger individuals. And with that, we can calculate the need for dirt and other materials to rebuild that part of the highway. In fact, we can begin the design process within 24 hours of the event. So you're saving time, you're making it safer, and you're getting a much more accurate response. And to go through the whole list of possible incidents, take off a wildfire, where it's not safe to enter the fire zone, but the drones can go there and able to assess what's happened to the roadway and near the roadway. And then begin to plan for how do we reforest, replant to prevent mudslides in the future during the rainy seasons and landslides and so forth and dirt flow. And we all have seen that in this region and up and down the state. So it's taking that and leveraging the L in LiFT, leveraging our current technologies and moving forward.
Another element I think that ties to this too is what is the skill set of the pilot, the operator? And you can learn to fly an eVTOL in much less time than a certified aircraft, which means a person can be, I'm a firefighter, I'm an EMT, I have a role that I play, and this is an adjunct role, which means they do this in addition to their, I'll say, day job, which means everyone can be a pilot of a simply designed aircraft that's in the zone of AAM. And I think that just changes the whole staffing model and changes the way we look at this. Again, going back to this is a paradigm shift. It's not a different aircraft, it's a different way of looking at solving the problem.
I think the other thing to add is we've got disaster response in the title, but we don't want to get to the disaster. We want to prepare and mitigate the chance of getting to it, or reduce its effect and impact on the urban wildland fire environment, especially in the wildland fires. So one example is, in a wildland fire, you're wanting to know what is the fuel line, the fuel material, the ground landscape ahead of where the fire is predicted to go, to get a better idea of how fast it's going to spread. How are you going to get that? A satellite image? It's probably going to be, unless it's in a governmental data set, it's going to be in the meters. But you want it to the decimeter. You want really high resolution information about the vegetation ahead of the fire so the modelers can predict where it's going to go. But the modelers predict with an atmospheric model. Where do they get that data from? A National Weather Service model. They might run their own model. You need data to help determine that that model stays within levels of reality. How do you do that? You need weather data. What could be done? Send a drone ahead of the fire, going up and down in about 1,000 meters every minute, collecting weather data. You can't ask a person to get into a helicopter and just go up and down for hours on end. A drone can do that. So it provides the data to help prepare so we mitigate the impact if the event has led to a disaster. But if, let's say you've got an area that has burnt in previous years and you're worried it's going to be burning again this year, go out and map it on a routine basis. An autonomous system can give you that data and give you the information to determine, oh, is that an area we need to worry about? Are we going to need to send people to it? Or it's like, no, there's another area that's got a lower water content in the local landscape. So that's more likely to burn just because of it being dry. So, or the winds are going to move in a certain direction. How do you get that? You either have a ground-based sensor, or you send up a drone. So I think the drone UAS systems can really help collect the data we need to mitigate the chance of reaching a disaster environment. And then there's the post-event analysis. A flooding event, sending out an autonomous system to do a LiDAR mapping of it, when you might not want to have a person in a manned helicopter or aircraft doing that.
To that end, Caltrans is doing research with UC Merced using tethered drones. And the drone could go up there with whatever kind of equipment you want, whether you want LED lighting in a construction zone or you want to do an analysis of a post-event, and you can put LiDAR equipment, whatever you need, and it's real time. The advantage of the tethered drone that's powered, you don't have to worry about running out of power on the drone itself. So this is now, and that's the wonderful thing about all these tools is it's not the Jetsons, it's this moment.
Right. So there's one thing about that. We're talking about data, right? So we talk about pre-disaster data and then post-disaster data. Right. But there's also the question about procedures, right? So that's a primary critical concern. And the question really becomes, how can federal, state, local agencies and private companies collaborate to establish standardized procedures and training for UAS operators to ensure safe, efficient, and coordinated disaster response efforts? I mean, I'm going to have Ed, you kick it off, and then anybody can follow up after that.
Well, I wanted to just piggyback on Peter's comment. So the databases, I mean, this is paramount to really having an impact. But you have to think about in what I call sustainability of your models, the databases that you're using, so that you're continually updating those and upgrading those. And I truly believe that there is a place for artificial intelligence from a predictive point of view and how we can use that from, along with surveillance data on having the most impact relative to the wildfires and the issues associated with those. And that's something that I'm not sure that a lot of attention has been given to right now.
Good. Do you have any input on the procedure side?
The procedures, there's so much of that is just situational dependent. And the training of the pilots, as was said earlier, I think is really, really important. And we ran across some of these same things you were talking about with the highly trained pilots and being used to that very early when we were working this in the early 2010s, when all we were worried about from a NASA point of view and a FAA point of view was ferrying drones coming back from theater from one base to another. Nobody was thinking about actually an industry associated with this. But in doing that, in training those pilots, it ended up being very situational dependent on what they were dealing with, on how well they could respond to not the nominal situations, but the abnominal situations.
Got it. That's actually super helpful.
I was going to add to the response to the question. So we've had a number of grants with a number of different collaborative groups as part of this FAA Center of Excellence based out of Mississippi State. And one thing that we heard was when you're responding to an event, you look for the ability to integrate these autonomous systems, and you want them to be at the point of need. So you're not bringing the person and the aircraft to where the event is. So you're looking for people that operate these systems that could then be able to provide response. But we know that if somebody has a 107 certificate, they could walk up and say, I've got 107 card. They've never flown. You can get it without flying. And flying a autonomous system for flying's sake is completely different to being in an incident command system and knowing the terminology and knowing who to communicate with, who's responsible for what. So if we're wanting more and more of these autonomous systems to be able to provide support to the agencies required to respond to the event, the team members not only need to know how to fly, but they need to know how to speak the communicative language of the ICS. Because otherwise, they become a hindrance to the operation, not a benefit, because they don't know how to communicate. Like, I worked for 8 years in the Volcano Observatory. I knew the terminology I had to use. I knew the call-down procedures because I'd worked in it. If I had a student working with me, I wouldn't just drop them in the middle of that. I'd give them a training in how to communicate the correct way so the person's not having to interpret what you're saying. So I think the more that we have these systems integrating, whoever is joining, whether it's a federal group that isn't normally responsible for that disaster event joining one, like traditionally they're on wildland fires, but they want to come into a volcanic eruption, could be a very different command system. Or a private sector that wants to say, hey, we've got these systems, we'd love to help. Okay, do your pilots have ICS training 100, 200, and 700? No. Well, okay, then you're really going to be a hindrance because you don't know the terminology of how to operate in that environment. Same thing for community, citizen, science-based operators. Walk up with a 107 card and a drone, it's like, yeah, you could have got that 107 card an hour ago at the FAA test site and bought that at Walmart with your credit card. Can you actually sit there and support an ICS where you've got all these manned aircraft flying around, you've got people on the ground? So I think what we as a community can do to be able to provide the tools to these events is just make sure everybody has the skill set, not just to fly, but how to work in the operation environment that's going to occur. And there's training that you can take and demonstrate the number of hours that you've flown in previous events. But the more that we can show that the people turning up have the skills to be a benefit, then the system itself will become a benefit.
To that end is preparation.
Right.
And Caltrans, we adhere to the National Response Framework, which then sets up the overall picture. And for a little bit of background, this all came out of 9/11, when you had inability of fire and police to communicate each other and problems in just common language, let alone frequency for their radios. And so the National Response Framework defines how that takes place, and the incident command system tells you this is your job. And your job in the emergency may be different than it was during the day. It could be you use your 107 skills in that setting. It's also scalable relative to the size of the event. And by training our staff, they know what to do, and they're put into whatever needs are coming up. To that end, all of my staff has gone through the intro-level ICS courses They've worked in the State Operations Center and the Office of Emergency Services and whatever the event may be. So it's integrated and it's prepared. And if you're ready to go, you're more likely to have a success in your response.
Yeah. And to add to that, this is not an esoteric discussion because the preparation is absolutely crucial. And I'll tell you an example of one. Hurricane Helene, we're all familiar with that, right? I actually received the after-action report from the Director of Aviation from the state of North Carolina. And what happened there was an absolute cluster. To be honest, there was a lot of general aviation folks who want to help, right? So they start showing up at all the airports, and they're starting to interfere with military transport. There's no pre-planning. Everybody's causing issues with the best intentions in their mind, right? You want to help out. Things are going south. And then you get the media feeding misinformation saying, oh, FEMA's preventing these operations from occurring. But the outputs from this report say, hey, if you actually go into the plan and say, this is how we're going to deal with either UAS or whether it be general aviation, this is how we're going to structure it. There are going to be certain airports that are open to military only, and then there's the other general aviation airports that could be used for the general aviation folks. But don't forget this, right? General aviation or a plane brings in stuff, right? Unless you have people on the other side, it's just going to pile up, and it's a big problem. So that's why you need pre-planning across all levels of government to happen. And that is what we're doing in Oregon, is we're getting together FAA, FEMA, Oregon Department of Emergency Management, and we're having a workshop in a couple of weeks to talk through all the issues and all the things that were brought up from Hurricane Helene. So more than anything, pre-planning is going to make a huge difference in terms of logistics.
And exercising.
If you don't have logistics, it doesn't work.
In terms of these issues, and I think that it's not where I intended the conversation to go, but it's been a very interesting place where we're going. Yeah. I would say that it's good especially if you have, they're either building right now a drone company or you're looking for your next venture or you are in a busy firm. One thing that I would say is that look for the themes of convergence. And you already mentioned AI once. And I think this is something that's going to be very important, especially as we're talking about ICS, for example, and the importance of standardizing interoperability. The Chinese have right now, a Chinese company has right now the record of the biggest drone swarm for a light show. If you haven't seen it, just Google it. It's 11,000 drones coordinating in real time to make this impressive. Now, there's a point to be made there, right? It's not just a light show. It's also reminding us how good they are at swarming technology, right? So, but it's 10,000 drones or more operating in coordination in a self-healing swarm. So if one of the drones is out of place, the drones can have near-field communication so they can talk to each other and retake their place. What blows my mind is that there is a single PC that is coordinating the 10,000 drones, right? They have a second one as a backup, right? But they make a point of showcasing that a single operator can now be in command of 10,000 drones at the same time. This shows the issue of interoperability at the technology level. I don't want to say it's a solved problem, but it's solvable, right? It's very easy now if you're using hardware and silicon to build interoperability within the code of that system. The issue is when you combine the silicon with the shave monkey, right? With the humans on the ground, right? So when we created systems for Autoland, auto landing is easy today for an aircraft. I mean, it's a damn impressive thing that we can do it. We can do auto land now on a carrier. That it's still something that I cannot understand how computers can do that, right? But when Garmin created Autoland for their general aviation fleet, and I don't know if you've seen some of their ads, it's actually basically turning any single GA equipped with this multi-million-dollar piece of equipment a drone, right? So you have this big red button that looks like something out of a Hanna-Barbera cartoon, right? So you will press it, right? So if you are flying with your spouse and your spouse is the pilot, but you are not, and suddenly he or she is incapacitated, you hit the big red button, and the plane does a bunch of things that I think are impressive, but there is one that it identifies the nearest airport that it's suitable for the airframe that you are flying, which shouldn't be hard, right? It's based on the charts of the airplane. It identifies a flight pattern, and it files the appropriate flight pattern within the pattern of that airport. Again, not terribly difficult, something that ForeFlight already does, right? It identifies the right frequencies, and here's where it starts to blow. It starts communicating with humans, both ATC and other pilots, informing them that an incapacitating autonomous system is now flying. So the system is capable to interact with humans. At a very low level, this was pre-LLMs. I don't know what they're going to do now with Chat. If you could integrate ChatGPT, it actually could answer to ATC and start reporting telemetry directly from the aircraft, right? So, but this system is the first one in the civilian sector that I know of that is made not only to create autonomy of the vehicle, but to create autonomy of the vehicle that is capable to operate with human beings on the loop. So to your point about ACS, right, we played here at CHGS a while back with the creation of an LLM that would be able to take autonomous assets that were virtual, they were not real, and would be able to communicate using the ICS language and vernacular and the information that is required. And it didn't take a lot of training to make sure that the system was capable of performing at expectation. Of course, what you then need is operators coordinating the swarm and the technology who are ICS capable, right? So then one of the challenges that we have here is the creation of this autonomous system that now will be able, in natural language, to be able to operate with humans in the same environment. And I think that's really exciting, a little scary, but it's really exciting. Right?
No, that makes perfect sense because you talk about deconfliction in areas. That's a perfect idea or solution. So, which brings me to my next question is, Martha and Peter too, what are the primary challenges and risks associated with deploying AAM and UAS in disaster areas? Because you think about it, communications is going to be down, everything is going to be down.
Yeah.
What are some of the challenges?
Actually, the fact that pre-planning became kind of a hot spot for this panel is great because it's one of my favorite topics too, so thank you. One of them is, if you're going to be handling a disaster situation, you need to know where you're going to be landing. And we're not talking about, vertiports, we're talking about landing in areas that are right next to the disaster. So you need to know where you're going to be landing before the event happens. So that's more pre-planning to say, here's my rural-urban interface, and in this town of Thousand Oaks, I've got 10, 15, 25 different places I can land, where there's enough space, it's flat enough, the surface is the right kind of surface, et cetera. And you might think, oh, you saw our aircraft flying in the video. It's pretty small. We landed in a cul-de-sac. But we had to take a lot of time to plan that landing to make sure, where are the light posts? Where is the wind coming from that day? What about people who are on the ground who want to witness this thing? Are we prepared to handle that situation? So the first thing is, where will I land? And how will I make that a safe landing spot? Because it starts with that. And I'll just say this, we've got 6 events coming up next month in Florida, and I said to my team, okay, figure out your takeoff and landing zones and get back to me this afternoon. And they're laughing at me because it can take 2 or 3 days with various systems like CalTopo to find out what is my slope, is this a good place to land? And so it looks easy to the naked eye, but for anyone who's gonna say, I'm gonna land my aircraft there, it could take hours and hours of work. So let's take a look at the dispatcher who's calling in various kind of emergency resources. He or she needs to know, where can that eVTOL land, and is it within running distance of the situation they have to handle? So this comes back to the whole issue of preparation. It's not just in the moment. But what you can do is also say, we're looking at, is extraction the application you're looking at? Am I bringing supplies to people? Are we dealing with some kind of conflicted communications that we have to deal with? You can see this aircraft is actually dropping various network communication tools. And so when you have no power at all in the situation, you can now network people together and they can communicate with each other, which I think is really important. Those are a couple of the things that come to mind for me. And Peter, you want to pick up from here?
Yeah, so the question was, what are the primary challenges and risks of putting US in disaster zones? It's an already complicated airspace today. And you're putting a load of new technology in the air. It's a rapidly changing environment. You might be requested to go to a new location because a fire hotspot's come up, or a volcanic eruption, the ash cloud's changed, or flooding, a particular bridge has been taken out. So you're being requested rapidly to go to a new location. So it's already busy with civilian manned and military manned or state, federal manned systems. And then you're putting up a suite of varying sizes from your octocopter, hexacopter, all the way up to the pivotal size systems into an already complicated environment. with people that aren't used to seeing them, and it's rapidly changing. You cannot be testing your system in that environment. That is what you want to do is you want to have, okay, we want to pursue as an organization to support wildland fire response. All right? Let's set up an event in a prescribed burn to test our system, to test our protocols, our operational risk assessment. Can we adapt if we have a change in wind speed that gets to the limit of our aircraft? What happens if it rains during the event? What happens if it snows during the event? How do you respond to a natural environmental change in the environment you're responding to? So you can walk up to and say, hey, we're going to respond to this. And like, oh, okay, so what's your operational risk assessment? What's your mitigation plan if there's a change in wind speed gusts and you're breaching the limit of your system? Well, here's how we responded, because we've tested it in a TRL, technical readiness level 6 and 7. So when you go to 8, it's an operational environment. When you're at 6, it's out of the lab, testing it in a controlled environment. So I think the biggest challenge that we're going to face is wanting to jump out there and put the new technology in to a test, before testing it, in an existing, busy, real-time, rapidly changing airspace environment. And if you do that without the testing, then you can never have a second first show. The optics it shows of coming in and being a hindrance, you as an organization will never get that second chance to showcase your technology first time. So I think the biggest challenge is coming in without having done it in that controlled environment, so you're not testing your system. Remember a controlled analysis in Florida that was done a couple of years ago as part of one of our projects. They were bringing in some external people to come in and help be part of the network. And the team turned up in the morning, and they were ready to go, but the batteries weren't charged, and they found out they did this, and this wasn't working, and their iPads weren't working. The person that was leading it said, go home. Like, go home. Come back tomorrow. Because they were going to be a hindrance to everybody else because they weren't prepared. They hadn't tested it in that location. Right. The more that we can test these new technologies, which, as Rodrigo says, is they're ready, but we test them in a controlled environment, so that's 6.5 to 7, then the end user, the beneficiary, if you think of it on the business idea or the mission model canvas for the government, what's the achievement they need, you'll be ready to meet that achievement because you've tested it behind your closed doors.
Yeah, and that deals with another challenge that we see, and that's simply resistance to change. So in the EMS example that you saw earlier, we need to help other entities, whether it's fire departments or ambulance providers, et cetera, in the system to say this is not a replacement product for what you have. This is a complementary product. We can get there faster and save the life if we can shave 5-6 minutes off of your delivery time. So what they need to see is that this is not a threat to their business. In fact, it helps them commit to a higher level of service by saying, I can save those 60,000 more lives next year by offering these services.
And that's the critical thing is, what is their mission achievement that they want to reach with a newer system? Because someone say, oh, I can get there faster. And I say, faster than what? A snail or a cheetah? I want to get there in 10 minutes. Okay, we can do it in 6. If you can do it in 11, they're never going to use your product because they can already get there in 10 minutes with the current solution. So the more that we can learn the mission needs of the end user, the beneficiary, and just like Rodrigo, as I teach a class in innovation entrepreneurship in the academic environment, and it's as you want to say, hey, I've got this cool shiny tool, do you want it? And a lot of people are going, oh, that's nice. But what you want to do is you want to say, I'll keep that in my back pocket, and I'll let you tell me the story of why you couldn't do your job. I wanted to go to here in 5 minutes. Why? Oh, the system could have gone there in 8. Okay, what do you want? And you come back, tweak all your designs, and then bring them what they want, and it becomes a must-have solution that's implementable, rather than what we call a nice-to-have, and the nice-to-have becomes a very expensive doorstop.
Yeah. And I think, this is such an important topic to discuss because it goes to the issue of adoption, right? How are we going to be adopting these technologies? And an example that I like to give sometimes in class is that you want to test augmented reality technologies with Pokemon Go, not in the battlefield. right? So there's a moment, and even in Pokemon Go, if you're deploying with children, that comes with a set of challenges that it's different than if you are deploying with adults, right? So understand, especially for any of you who might be in that startup space, which is so exciting, right? So, and I'm sure that I'm not telling anybody anything new, but especially if you're going to be entering the emerging, or you look at the emerging management, law enforcement response area, your level of maturity it has to be much higher because you're going to be in the technology adoption curve. If you remember, you're not dealing with early adopters, right? Your technology has to be mature and feel ready by the moment you're entering that place. Now, you can interact with them to learn about stuff. They're a great place to experiment. I mean, DoD is one of the institutions that is allowed from time to time to blow up things and put them on fire instead of putting them up. So if you can partner with DoD, for example, or with CAL FIRE or Caltrans to do things in controlled environments, then they're an incredible partner because they're going to come to you with some of the nastiest problems you can solve, and if you can work with them, that will be fantastic. Once your technology is mature, one of the challenges that we have often is that the market on these areas, on emergency management, tends to be not big enough to sustain a complete business model, but it's a great place to have a dual-use company like Pivotal, where you can be doing many things, including servicing the emergency management or law enforcement community, right? So what I would say here is, to this point, especially for anybody who's kind of in that pre-Series A moment of your startup or venture, right? So this is a great area to learn, use it for that, and it's a great area to eventually have a sustainable business model when you have a very mature technology. It's not a place where you go to learn about the capabilities of your tech.
It's also an aspect of changing attitude. And one way to phrase it is, I think, in terms of convergence, where we have technologies, processes, and individuals who are combining it in a different way. And this is where the ICS system illustrates that you take people in one role and put them into another. Same thing with technologies. And when people begin to think, okay, I'm going to shift, I'm going to do a change from what I normally do and apply it differently, the next thing is the concept of revolution. And what we are experiencing, as much as we're using other tools that are known to us, is we're in an environment where the changes are happening so rapidly. And that's why we enjoy what we're doing, because we are part of this revolution. And down the road, when the history of this era is written, that's going to be one of the key elements, the revolution of the technology, the revolution of the application of the technologies. And the final element is the slowest element, and that's policy. The policy is always lagging behind technology, whatever the technology happens to be. But we can be part of that element of how do we shift this and move it along so that the policy is supportive of what we're doing and provides the overall framework of how we do that. And again, the 9/11 with the National Response Framework is an illustration of that. But we are doing it. That's a great thing of what the deployment of UAS AAM is. Guys, this is it. We're the history makers.
Awesome. And on that note, Josh, can we have another extra hour, please? Just kidding. No, I have many more questions which I'd love to ask, but we love to have audience participation. So there's a Slido survey. So if you have any questions, please do submit them right now, and then we'll go ahead and ask them. So, here we go. So the first one, please discuss the efficacy of controlled burns in UAS AAM involvement. So who wants to take that one? Ed?
Actually, that is the thing, one of the things I was thinking about relative to AI. Taking incredible amounts of information, deciding where controlled burns would really work and exactly where to start them. Based on information that most individuals could not process, synthesize, and make an impactful solution with. Mm-hmm. So that's something I think that would be very doable now.
Mm-hmm. Cool.
What I was going to add to that is, I think the ability with the controlled burns is you want to be there you don't want to impact the controlled burn. Just like you didn't want a real-world wildland fire volcanic eruption response. Mm-hmm. So how can you be a benefit to that event. Maybe it's showing that you can provide large-scale surveillance of the event when you can't see it you can't see the full extent of the burn from the ground. Yeah. The one about the tethered drone, something that you can have away from the burn site but can give you that full spectral view. Maybe it's mapping the vegetation to see how well the burn did versus predictions. So reaching out to locally whoever is the organization responsible for the burn event and talk to them well before they planned it, not, hey, you're doing it tomorrow, can we join? You're never going to get in. But doing it so you say, oh, you're going to be doing this. What's your operations? How can we help? Oh, we'll bring out our systems and have it at the edge of the area and then be able to provide you that data. And they can look at that, somebody in their team who's not responsible for the burn management, but is there as part of the support. And they can go, oh, now you're collecting that. You could help us on an actual event next year or within the fire season. So I think that's where the interaction between it can help is how can you be a benefit in an environment that's got more of a control around it and is not freely moving based on the environment?
I'll add just one extra thing, is that there is a local company, you might be in the room, so I'm not going to say who, that actually has been conducting experiments for controlled burns that are drone created. So using these little pyro balls that you can use now to, well, they would send the drone. And I mean, the results that I saw were very impressive. I don't know where they are in that ramp. I know that a lot of people were very excited about it. And the idea that you can now conduct controlled burns using drone assets that are less risky in environments that you couldn't necessarily have done them before, if it is hilly, etc. So that's the other part, that just kinetically you might be able to now use this kind of drone technology that was not available before in controlled burns that would have been too hard to perform in a traditional way. So.
Yeah. And so I think there's definitely, it's a multi-role, right, for UAS. It's pre, post, and also actually ignition too. So there's definitely lots and lots of roles drones could play in this. So I'd love to combine the next two questions because they look at really the role of educational institutions, and I think it's absolutely critical. So any comments from you?
Yeah, I'll start. So on the educational inside is learn about what your end user of your educated student is going to be. Like, what are the needs of the industry? Because then you can start to build your training so you have a resilient employee when they leave. They've got the skills ready to become an effective member of that workforce. The other one is for those education establishments that aren't part of some of these national programs, like the test sites, like the Assure Center of Excellence, at least around the wildland fires, is reach out to the people that lead those, because as education establishments, we're always open for collaborations. Because I would say we're open for business. So if you're interested in this, talk to me. As Jimmy mentioned yesterday, we have that triple overlap. There may be one local to you, or there may be a test range that's connected to one of the test sites, like a Quasi. And that way, then, you can start becoming one of those recognized, trusted groups. And that's the trust. You want that trust. So therefore, your students in their classes or as they graduate become the employees of the future in those organizations, whether it be at the state level, private sector, or become the next versions of myself and Rodrigo and teaching the class in 10 or 15 years' time.
Mm-hmm. This also speaks to another problem, which is a bigger one, which has to do with the future of work and what it means to build a skill set, a workforce with skills we don't know we'll be needing in the future. We're seeing the first data, for example, on technological unemployment associated to large language models and artificial intelligence, and some of the first places where we seem to have statistically significant variations is in junior coding, right? So if you are right now coming out of a STEM program and you are a junior coder, that's just entering the market, your market looks much different and much harder than it did 3 years ago, because now a senior coder that knows what he or she's doing, augmented with the GPT API, can do things that he or she couldn't do before, and therefore the company might decide not to hire you anymore. So we're seeing a big transformation there. We're going to see it with automation. So I would say that for us as academic institutions, part of our challenge is how do we prepare you keep yourself updated beyond whatever we can give you in the 4 years that you are, or in the 2 years that you are in the program. Now, this challenge is not new. Alvin Toffler has been talking about the importance of velocity in education since the 70s, but it is getting worse, right? So what would academic institutions do? I think that would be better is to create foundational paths for anybody, frankly, from the 8th grade all the way to college, to be able to ride the wave. So, of course, subject matter expertise matters, and it's going to be important. It still pays off to know Python if you're going to be playing with ChatGPT. But more importantly than that, specifically in the case of drones, understanding fundamentals, understanding aerodynamics, understanding some of the elements of technology, understanding what makes VTOL different from fixed. So even if the technology changes later and the regulation changes later, you can ride that wave more effectively.
But the institutions, these state DOTs, this county level, even local municipalities, retrained, and keep the employees in line with where the technology is going.
Yep.
And then they'll be prepared as these changes take place.
And then there's a start early argument, which is a customer called me last night and said, I'd like to fly into my local high school and show off my pivotal aircraft. And he said, how do I do it? I said, call the principal, have that person assign this to their office manager, and get yourself over there. Go into the classroom, show some videos and some images, but fly right into the high school compound and show this off, because in 4th grade or 6th grade, whatever the year they are in, they need to see this and get excited, and it's where the spark starts. Mm-hmm. I realize we're talking about all kinds of things here, and we've sort of expanded the scope of this panel. I hope that's okay, but we're just trying to say what do we have in touch with, and the educational piece I think is extremely important. This should not be foreign to anybody who's in school today.
And the more you can get real-world examples into the classroom. Mm-hmm. So if you're an education establishment, talk to the end user, find their challenges, and run those as examples in your class.
Right.
Or
And
your
this
testing.
is in Paducah, Kentucky. That's the other major thing. Like, they have never seen anything like this before, which is awesome.
And just
let me make one point relative to that.
10 seconds.
I'd be remiss if I didn't do that. But there's some softer skills of communication, leadership, strategy that I think we need to relook at in this area. There's no real strategic plan on where we're going. There's tactical plans, absolutely. But strategically, where we need to go, we've talked about technology, we've talked about policy. But another entity that we have not talked about here today, we heard much yesterday about public-private partnerships. There's a lot of public partnerships, but there's a private voice that needs to be at the table and to be heard. Power companies, they need to be heard. Insurance companies, they need to be heard. Having all of that information together will help us make better decisions, understand the risk associated with various strategies that we take on to have the most impact, and our collective efforts having the most efficacy.
Perfect. Awesome.
Very good summary.
That was a wonderful, I think, end. So thank you. Big hand of applause for everybody. And Abby, I needed your button. I need your timer. It's a cell phone? I'll remember next time. Well, thank you, everybody, for an awesome time, and thank you for the questions. I hope you had some great lessons learned from this and are able to take away some good facts and tidbits. And if you have any questions, everybody will be available after. Come find us in the audience. Thank you.
That was excellent. Really great.